The topic today is organic versus non-organic. What do myeloma patients need to know? And as I mentioned, this was a suggestion from somebody specific in a survey, but it's not the only time that I've heard that you guys are interested in learning about this topic. And with over 300 registrants for today's meeting, it's clear to me that this topic is so important to be able to help us know how to best fuel our bodies. Now, I think it's really important because nutrition is one of the ways where we can gain back a little bit of control in our lives. Myeloma is diagnosed, and all of a sudden, whether you're a patient or a care partner or a loved one, your life is thrown into this crazy world of doctor's appointments and new terminology and trying to figure out what treatments are best and ugly side effects that you don't want. And nutrition is an awesome way where you can kind of rein back in a portion of the control that used to be your life and be able to say, this is how I'm going to take care of myself. Now, I want you guys to know today's topic is not what you're supposed to eat or else you're a horrible human being. It's not, please follow these guidelines or else your myeloma is going to go out of control. That's definitely not what we're promoting today. What we're promoting today is good nutritional education so that you can make wise decisions on how best to treat your body through nutrition. Okay, so I know it's going to be a great event. I'm excited about it. And here to present to us today is Kailey Proctor. So Kailey Proctor, MPH RDN CSO. Lots of awesome acronyms after her name there. She is the outpatient oncology dietitian at the City of Hope, Orange County. That's in California, in case you were wondering. She has worked with cancer patients for a little over 5 years and enjoys interacting with patients and their caregivers throughout their cancer journey. Before working as a dietitian, she received her bachelor's degree in human nutrition, foods, and exercise with a concentration in oh my gosh, how do you say that?
Dietetics. I know it's a mouthful.
Dietetics. Okay, thank you. From Virginia Tech. She completed her dietitian internship through Cal Poly SLO with rotations in Santa Barbara. And after she became a dietitian, she went on to earn a master's of public health at the University of Virginia. When she isn't working, Kailey enjoys trying new restaurants throughout Orange County, hiking near the coast, or spending time reading a book with her 3-year-old cat, Coconut. With that being said, Kailey, the time is now yours. Thanks so much for being here.
Awesome. Thanks so much for introducing me, Audrey. I am so excited to be here. I always joke anytime I can get on my nutrition soapbox, I am more than happy to do so. Having working with cancer patients for going on 5 years, almost 6 years now, I know there's a lot of confusion in this in the oncology world, and I'm happy to dispel a few. And as Audrey mentioned, this is not a diet that you have to follow. And if you get off track or you decide you don't want to do anything that I recommend or present to you, you are not a terrible human being at all. You have to do what's best for you. And again, nutrition is a really great way for you guys to take a little bit of control back during a very scary and stressful time in your life when you feel like you have so many plates spinning. So I'm here to help with that. I'm just going to put my PowerPoint in presentation mode now. And so the topic of today, organic versus conventional foods. What's a cancer patient supposed to do? The goals of the presentation today is we will define the term.
Do you want to share your slides?
Oh yeah, that might be helpful. Thanks, Audrey.
No problem.
All right, we are going to do this. There we go. Sorry about that, guys.
No, it's okay.
All right. So organic versus conventional. What's a cancer patient supposed to do? The goals of today's presentation is we will define the term organic, understand the regulation process, how it came to be, the pros and cons of purchasing organic foods, the dirty dozen, the clean 15. I get a lot of questions about this. And then of course, we'll leave time for Q&A at the end. This is a very interactive presentation. I have graphics and exercises we'll walk through. So hopefully it answers your questions, but there will be time. So how things all got started, I thought it was really interesting to learn that organic farming actually started around the 1940s. So between the 1940s and the 1980s, there was a huge growth in what was considered organic growing methods for both livestock and produce. So due to this growth, the Secretary of Agriculture drafted the Organic Food Production Act of 1990. And this was really cool because it established a national list of substances that were allowed and those that were prohibited if you were going to be a organic farm or growing organic livestock. From this, the National Organic Standards Boards was developed, and this is a group of public volunteers that includes organic growers, handlers, retailers, environmentalists, scientists, advocates, and USDA certifying agents. So a very wide, diverse group of people from all aspects, and then they oversee the National Organic Program. What does organic mean? By the USDA, it's defined as organic meat, poultry, eggs, and dairy products that come from animals that are given no antibiotics or growth hormones. Organic food is produced without using most conventional pesticides, fertilizers, and made with synthetic ingredients or sewage sludge, bioengineering, or ionizing radiation. It sounds straightforward, but I'll be perfectly candid with you. Nothing with nutrition is ever that straightforward. And even as a dietitian who I've been working in this field for 5-6 years, I get tripped up on these terms. So I'm sure you've seen these on labeling, you've seen the USDA organic logo. So we're kind of going to walk through what the different organic terms mean because there is a lot of nuance here. So the first one is 100% organic. And that term is only used for products that are one ingredient. So like the carrots, tomatoes, berries, chicken, beef, it's just that one ingredient. And so now we're going to break it down a little bit into meat, livestock, which includes poultry, eggs, and dairy products, and then produce like fruits and vegetables. So for meat and livestock, this means that the animals, the cows and the chickens, they're growing and they're living in a condition that would match their natural behavior. They're not given any antibiotics, they're not given any growth hormones, and they're fed 100% organic feed and forage. Produce, on the other hand, it's just grown in soil that has not used those prohibited substances for up to 3 years. You can go to the USDA's website and you can look up every year what substances are prohibited and which are allowed in organic growing techniques. I also want to touch on the fact that all organic foods, whether it's 100% organic, made with organic ingredients, none of them include GMOs. And that GMO is something that has DNA that's been altered using genetic engineering. I would touch on it more, but that could be a whole different presentation topic in and of itself. But just know all organic terminology does not have any GMOs in it. So we just touched upon 100% organic. So again, that's just one single ingredient, nothing else to it. Organic, on the other hand, has a little more leeway. Organic means that up to 95% of the products there include organic ingredients. So there's that like 5% that might not be organic, but it doesn't include any antibiotics, any of the banned pesticides, fertilizers, or GMOs. And then this is where it gets a little bit tricky. So we're going to talk about the ones that are made with organic ingredients and then just organic ingredients. And typically this is going to happen when we talk about processed foods. I'm sure most of you have seen, organic tortilla chips, organic cookies, organic, you name it, everything these days seems to have organic or made with organic ingredients. So when it comes to processed foods, it means that there are no artificial colors, preservatives, or flavors. It may include non-agriculture ingredients. And so what that means is that, like, for instance, typically yogurt will have maybe some enzymes in it. Think pectin in jams and jellies, or baking soda in baked goods. Like if you're getting an organic pancake mix, it might have baking soda, and that might not be organic, but again, it's not artificial flavors, colors, or preservatives. Again, no GMOs. But the key differentiation between made with organic ingredients and then if it just says organic ingredients. So if it's made with organic ingredients, more than 70% of the ingredients are organic. If it just says organic ingredients, it's less than 70%. Again, I know it's confusing, and I think this is why consumers get tripped up all the time on, is this good for me? Is it not good for me? Is it organic? If it has anything with organic, it's gone through the USDA. It doesn't have any of the harmful pesticides or anything that's banned or prohibited. So you can take comfort in that. It's just knowing how much of the ingredient is considered organic. And there are a few reasons why people opt to eat organic. Again, this has been around since the 1940s. I don't see this buzzword really going away anytime soon. If anything, I feel like more places are trying to be accommodating for organic foods. For one, people perceive it to be safer. There's no chemical fertilizers, pesticides, antibiotics, or growth hormones used. It's kinder to the environment. And the one that I'm going to focus on more is people often think organic foods are healthier. They think they have more vitamins, minerals, it's cleaner, more omega-3 fatty acids. There's a big buzzword with organic foods when it comes to health and nutrition. And, you know, the farmers, they have goals too. If you're an organic farmer, you want to make sure that you're improving the soil and water quality, cutting down on pollution, providing safe and healthy places for the farm animals to live, enabling natural farm and animal behavior, and promoting a self-sustaining cycle of resources on a farm. So, I mean, on paper, this all sounds great. It's very eco-friendly. It seems very safe. However, I don't know if you guys noticed too much. There was nothing really about the health of the cows, the chickens, the fruits, or the vegetables, that it's going to be more nutritious. So that kind of has to make you wonder, like, well, where does nutrition come into play with organic versus conventional foods? Like, I thought that was the point of eating organic. It's supposed to be healthier. Well, like I always say, I hate to be that buzzkill, and some of my patients call me the Grim Reaper of food, but there are very little health benefits that have been studied for organic foods. I'll touch on a few, but it's not as much as most people think or as much as the media perceives it to be. I will say there is a slightly higher amount of antioxidants. So those are those cancer fighting molecules that we're really interested in. And they think it's because this sounds so cute. And when I was researching this, I loved learning it. The fruits and the vegetables, they have to work a little bit harder to fight off some of like the pesticide exposure, the bugs that could cause rotting and decaying. So they kind of have to like buffer themselves up a little bit more. And so in return, that means they have higher amounts of antioxidants, but it's very hard to measure the difference between organic and conventional in terms of antioxidants. I mean, one of my things that I always say, nutrition is a tough science. It's tough to prove scientifically because one tomato can vary from another tomato and it can be grown in the same condition, different soil compositions and quality. So again, research is showing there might be a slightly higher amount of antioxidants, but not too significant. Meat and poultry have found to have slightly higher amount of omega-3 fatty acids, which is another really cool area of nutrition just because it's good for your heart, your hair, your nails, your skin. Specifically salmon, red meat, and eggs tend to have those omega-3 fatty acids. One interesting thing I did find was that there were lower levels of cadmium, which is a toxic chemical naturally found in soil, but the plants absorb it. And so you would think like, okay, so fruits and vegetables would have lower levels of this cadmium too, not quite the organic grains. So like wheat products, they had the lower levels versus the fruits and the vegetables. Again, very trivial, not anything too robust. The most important one I think is this pertains more towards meat, chicken, eggs, dairy. There were lower levels of dangerous bacteria in meat. And so what this just meant was this dangerous bacteria was resistant to antibiotics, which I don't think would be too surprising since they're not being pumped all the time with antibiotics. So the organic ones, if something were to happen, those cows would no longer be used for production, but they could fight off that bacteria. So it is important to note that both organic and conventional pesticide levels, which is typically what we talk about with organic, were found to be under the safety limits that the FDA does impose. It's still unclear though, specifically for cancer patients and other vulnerable populations, how that affects us, specifically pregnant women, children, and of course, cancer patients, as I mentioned. So nutritionally, like I said, hate to be a buzzkill, but research right now is showing if you're eating organic just from a nutrition standpoint, it might not be as beneficial versus if you're looking at it from a food safety perspective and to try to lower your exposure of pesticides, which again have been linked to an increased risk of cancer, diabetes, but we'll talk about that at a later slide. So, and again, like I mentioned earlier, like organic, it's huge, it's buzzy. Everyone thinks because they eat organic, it's great. And there are these beacons of health. But again, research not quite there yet. And I don't know about you, but oftentimes when I meet with patients, they'll tell me they eat organic. And then when you ask a little bit more, it's not organic produce that they're eating. They're not buying grass-fed organic beef. It's not the organic eggs or the dairy. It's organic cookies. And at the end of the day, we're going to just remember a cookie is a cookie. But in case you need a little bit more convincing, we're going to walk through a little exercise that goes over Oreos, America's favorite cookie, versus organic Oreos. So again, Oreos, love them. They were my favorite growing up. If we look at the nutrition facts label, we'll just run through this real quick. As a side note, one thing that I absolutely love is a couple of years ago, it is now required that most nutrition labels have this added sugar aspect. So always check that out. Always read your nutrition facts label. It's kind of the summary, the blueprint of what you are eating. It gives you all the information that you need. But as you can see, we look at these Oreos, fairly long list of ingredients at the bottom, 3 cookies, 160 calories, 14 grams of sugar, all added sugar. Again, nothing too wild and crazy. It's a cookie. We expect this from an Oreo, right? But then we get these Newman O's and they're made with organic flour and organic sugar, and they just have like this health halo around it. So we're super excited, right? It's a little short of an ingredient list because again, like organic foods can't include high fructose corn syrup. There's a little bit more regulation there. You see organic unbleached wheat flour, organic powdered sugar, organic invert syrup. Delightful. And then we look at the sugar content. It's still 10 grams. And I will say it's important to note that the Newman O's serving size, which was not included on their website, it's 2 cookies. So 2 cookies is giving you 10 grams of sugar, which is basically the same as an Oreo. So again, at the end of the day, sugar is sugar. Organic versus conventional in terms of junk food, it's still junk food. It's still a cookie. It's still chips. So with that, just try to pick which ones that you enjoy more. Because even from a health perspective, as we saw earlier, there's not too many true health benefits to eating organic versus conventional. And of course, we have to talk about the cons of eating organic. There are very few, just because, again, it is better for the environment. It's a little bit safer in terms of specifically beef, chicken, poultry, that aspect. But from health perspective, not too much. But you have to remember, organic is expensive. It can be 2, 3, 4 times the amount as conventional. And I know for everyone, that's not exactly feasible to do. So there is a group that developed, or they started in about 2004. It's called the Environmental Working Group. I think this was really cool too. So since 2004, every year they put out their own report of the Dirty Dozen versus the Clean 15. And so the Dirty Dozen are the 12 highest contaminated fruits and vegetables with pesticides. And then the Clean 15 are the least exposed. And so they test the 46 most popular fruits and vegetables, and then they test over 4,600,000 samples. And then they also test it in a way that consumers would eat it. So when they're testing avocados, for instance, they're washing the avocados, they're peeling the avocado, and then they're testing it. With all the Dirty Dozens, which tend to be pretty thin flesh, they're washing them under warm water. So it's not like they're just picking it from the ground and testing it and calling it a day. So as you can see, the Dirty Dozen tend to be the ones that have either a very thin skin to them or they're grown on the ground. So think like your green leafy vegetables, spinach and mixed greens 2 and 3. But the Clean 15 tend to be one with either very thick skin that you're not going to eat, like oranges, bananas, avocados, or ones that you tend to peel the skin off of. I think that's why sweet potatoes and carrots made the clean 15, because some people take the skin off the sweet potatoes and take the skin off of carrots. So this I really like just because it is a nice middle ground. So if you can't afford to eat all organic, but you are interested in eating, you're just interested in getting less pesticide exposure, this is a great way to kind of budget accordingly. Like if you really love berries, it might be worth it to you to get organic strawberries and blueberries. And then, you know, on the clean 15 ones, like please don't buy organic bananas. Like just don't do it. There's no point. You're taking the skin off. Same with oranges, grapefruit. The skin is so thick that the pesticides probably are not going to get through to the actual fruit or vegetable. And interestingly enough, the clean 15 for this year, 2023, none of the foods tested positive for more than 3 pesticides. So again, very clean, which I kind of hate as a buzzword, but very clean, less than 3 pesticides. And avocados and sweet corn were the cleanest, with less than 2% of samples showing any detectable pesticides. Whereas, again, I am more of a dietitian who's like, how can we add to your diet? How can we increase your health? I don't like this whole fear monogering around diet and diet culture, but it is important to kind of shed light to some things that are going on, specifically on the Dirty Dozen. The green beans were just added this year, and that was a new one. And so the green beans were added because in up to 6% of samples, there was a neurotoxic organophosphate, try saying that 5 times fast, that was actually prohibited from being used since 2011. So how it got there, not really sure, but that might be one you want to consider organic. So again, I just really like this group, this organization. Every year they have a new Dirty Dozen Clean 15. You can sign up on their website if you're interested in learning more. They go through their sampling techniques and methodology. It's really great. Even if you can't afford to do the clean 15, the Dirty Dozen, you come to me and you're like, Kailey, I am so stretched thin. I live in an area where I don't get organic produce, or I just don't have the money for it. I've got too much going on right now, especially if you're in the midst of treatment. I understand you have a lot on your plate, a lot of bills. So don't worry, we've got other options if you want to be more eco-friendly or even actually get a little bit more nutrition than just eating strictly organic. So the other options include shop at your local farmers market. I realize that I am blessed to live in Southern California, where we have farmers markets all year round. Every city has a couple farmers markets. So I know this might not be relatable to everyone, but if you have access to a farmers market, it's a great way to learn how the produce is grown. You learn your farmers, you learn their techniques. Oftentimes too, you can visit the farms if you want. So that's always a really great option. It also cuts back on travel time. It's good for the environment, less emissions from traveling across the country to get produce. My favorite one is purchased seasonally. If you eat in season, it's going to taste a lot better. So you're more likely to eat the fruits and the vegetables. So again, like tomatoes in the summer taste fantastic versus when you eat them in the dead of winter. Same with berries. And again, they just retain more of their nutrition because they're growing in their peak conditions. So I really recommend eat seasonally. And if you have access, a farmer's market is great because at the farmer's market, you're also going to learn what's in season based on what the farmers have. Another one is really easy. We can all do this. Just wash your produce. You don't need to waste your money on any of those fruit and vegetable washes. You just need warm water. Wash your produce. If you want, like if you have potatoes, for instance, maybe give them a little bit of an extra scrub just because they are grown on the ground. They can be a little dirty. And then peeling. I put this one with 2 asterisks there just because, yes, when you peel produce, you are removing a lot of the pesticide exposure because, again, it's right on the skin. However, you can't exactly peel blueberries. You can't really peel strawberries. And oftentimes when you peel produce like fruits and vegetables, that's where all the fiber is. And fiber is so cool from a nutrition standpoint, but that's where all the vitamins, minerals, antioxidants are. Fiber is also going to help you maintain a healthy body weight. If you're in the midst of treatment and you're struggling with constipation, fiber is your best friend. So I use this one sparingly just because it's not my go-to. But if you are very concerned about pesticide exposure and for things like carrots, for instance, just peel that skin off and that will reduce your pesticide exposure. Again, I know I said this earlier, but shopping at farmers markets and purchasing seasonally is going to give you the most bang for your buck nutritionally. If you're looking at reducing your pesticide exposure for overall health, washing your produce, clean 15, dirty dozen, shopping organic where you can, and peeling produce is going to be your best bet. So really at the end of the day, I'm going to meet you where you're at, depends on what your goals are. And so and dandy, but what happens if I don't eat any meat? I'm vegetarian or I'm pescatarian. I just eat fish for my protein. Well, I've got you covered too. So there's, for fish, it's a little bit different. The terminology is a little bit different. We're going to go through it. There's wild caught fish and then there's farm raised. For the sake of this presentation, I feel like most people usually talk about wild caught and farm raised for salmon. So just kind of go with me here, but it applies to all fish. Wild caught is like the organic livestock. It's caught from the natural habitat. So whether that's from a river, a lake, or an ocean, whereas farm raised is they're raised in a tank and they're fed, you know, throughout the day, whatever they need to be fed. So as you can see, one is out in the open and then the other are in these large tanks. And so we're going to go over a little bit more about the health benefits, pros and cons. So for wild caught, this was also interesting to me. I knew it had lower saturated fat, but also calorie wise, a lot less calories. And I think it could just be by the way that the farm raised fish are fed, the feed that they're fed. So that's one thing to remember. It is more expensive. It's just like organic produce and livestock. So you do pay, especially with salmon, a pretty hefty penny for wild caught. So I understand that's not feasible for everyone. No antibiotics are used. This was a mixed issue in the 1990s and 2000s when Chilean salmon were imported to Japan, and then they were testing them and they found that there were higher antibiotics used in the farm-raised Chilean salmon versus wild-caught. Interestingly enough, though, farm-raised does have a higher omega-3 fatty acid content. Again, I think it's because they're being fed a specific feed, so they can kind of modify what the fish are getting and how much vitamin and mineral content they're having. But again, they do have more saturated fat and calories. There are higher contaminants in farm-raised fish, so think more mercury. Generally, mercury, though, is going to be in your bigger fish, the ones that kind of eat the smaller fish just because they have more exposure. So that would be things like sharks, swordfish, king mackerel, and tilefish. And then the POPs and the PCPs, I think these are very cool. So, well, not cool in terms of like, I want you to get more of them, just cool in how they work. So the POPs are persistent organic pollutants. And so they have been linked to type 2 diabetes and obesity. And they found that people who ate more farm-raised fish and who are obese had more of these POPs in their bloodstream. And then the PCB is one of the POPs, and they found that in farm-raised salmon, the PCP, so again, one of these pollutants that we don't want in our bodies, was 16 times higher. 16, 1-6. So that was crazy to find out. And then with farm-raised, you kind of just don't know the antibiotic exposure that they're fed, because again, they're farm-raised. It's kind of like the conventionally grown beef, pork versus wild caught, you know, there's no antibiotics there. And also too, just the coloring, like wild salmon just looks a lot prettier than salmon. Again, I'm a visual person, so I just like the look of wild caught salmon more than farm raised salmon. So these again are just some things to consider. But what about cancer? That's why we're here. Myeloma, like what am I supposed to do with the cancer aspect? Like, that's great. You talked about obesity and diabetes. It's mixed results, which is so frustrating. Like, don't get me wrong. I love my job, guys. Like, I love working with cancer patients, but sometimes when I meet with patients one-on-one and I have these like mixed results, it really frustrates me too, because I can't give you the best guidance just because we don't know what we don't know. Wild caught does potentially come from polluted waters. Farm raised, however, have more of those PCPs and the POPs that we talked about based just on what they're fed. So right now for cancer patients, they're just recommending don't overdo it. And so then the question comes into like, well, what does that mean? Don't overdo it, which I think is great. I always just say whenever I meet with patients, like, I don't want you eating salmon for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, because then you're missing out on other amino acids, another more nutrients that you could be getting. So again, we don't want you limiting your fatty fish just because it goes along with the Mediterranean diet, and that's also been shown to reduce the risk of cancer. I know those that are in remission, eating more of that Mediterranean diet, or what the American Institute for Cancer Research, their new American plate method, that all falls into that. And they include salmon, fatty fish, because it's so good for you. So if you can, maybe opt for the wild cut if it's in the budget. So all this is to say, what do I say as a dietitian? I hit you guys with a lot of information. Really, at the end of the day, I just want you to eat fruits and vegetables. I think as Americans, we don't eat enough fruits or vegetables to begin with. And you also have to take into consideration a lot of these studies about pesticide exposure, increasing the risk of cancer, increasing the risk of obesity. A lot of them are done in rats or rodents. And one, their metabolism is different. And two, we can't directly translate that. And they're often exposed to a way higher amount of pesticide levels than Americans do, because most barely get even 5 servings of fruits and vegetables. So I think that is something to consider. I always say I want to meet my patients where they're at. If you come to me and you tell me you have no budget, you can eat all organic, great. Go for it. I support you. Just know that it doesn't necessarily mean your diet is going to be any healthier, especially if you're including these organic processed junk foods. It's more environmentally friendly. I would say if you can, with the salmon or the seafood, wild caught might just be a better bet. But again, I do know it can be a splurge or really expensive. But again, take this with a grain of salt, because nutrition is an evolving science. You could wake up tomorrow and we could find out everything that we knew about nutrition was wrong. I mean, my favorite example is the eggs. One year they're the best thing in the world. Eat 2 eggs a day, go for it. And then the next year they're vilified. We should never touch eggs. Same with dairy. Nutrition is just never going to be a perfect science, unfortunately. And this is just what we have for right now. But I really just want you to eat your fruits and vegetables. We do know that eating more of a plant-focused diet greatly reduces the risk of up to 12 cancers. It helps you maintain a healthy body weight, which is really great for patients who kind of want to stay in remission and have more control over their diet. So that is my overview of organic versus conventional. Even when I was doing the research for this, I was kind of amazed to learn that it wasn't as healthy as people often think it is. It's more from a pesticide exposure and agricultural practice, not necessarily a health term. Just my sources. And any questions? I would love to answer questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kailey. I loved your memes. I loved the presentation. It was very well done.
I just joke, like, if you're not a cat person, I'm sorry. I love my cats.
No, it was wonderful. Thank you so much. So just so the audience knows, you can enter your questions where it says questions and answers. You can choose to be anonymous, or you can have your name out there, whatever works best for you. I'm going to be going through the questions, and there's several already, so I'm excited to get started. First, I see a couple questions here about GMO, and I know you said it could be a whole different webinar that we discuss GMOs, but if you don't mind explaining what GMO stands for, and then really what is kind of the controversy around GMOs being included.
I think that's great. I have to laugh at Stephen's comment about the FDA being a little corrupt. I could talk about that in terms of the supplement regulation, but I'm just going to go talk a lot of that. So GMOs, genetically modified organisms, they're very controversial. And I see why, because think about it, you're taking DNA, you're kind of extracting it almost, and then you're making it into a whole nother fruit, vegetables. Soy is also one that can typically be very genetically modified. And I know soy also has a bad connotation. it goes both ways. Some of our favorite produce is genetically modified. Like, I don't know about you guys, I love Pink Lady and Honey Crisp apples. They're genetically modified. Like, they're in the dawn of time, there were not Pink Lady apples or genetically modified apples. So that is one aspect, is we do get a wider variety. We can also increase the vitamin mineral content, because again, you're manipulating the DNA, so you kind of get what you want. And I know that sounds weird, but you get what you want when you do genetically modified ingredients. However, there have been some studies that show it might not be that beneficial and might actually be harmful for children. You just never know what we're kind of doing behind the scenes. So I see why it might be an issue, but for right now, they're generally recognized as safe. And that's all I got. That's all I can go off of.
That's great. My stepdad is a farmer. So I grew up on a farm. I worked on the farm. He got his degree in agriculture. And so I learned at a young age, Red Delicious were nasty, so they decided to do something about it, right?
Yes. I mean, I went to Virginia Tech undergrad. They have a huge agricultural program. And so all the ag guys would be like coming to the little dietitians and being like, no, you don't understand. Like, half the food that you guys tell people to eat is genetically modified. You have to remember too, there are buzzwords, right? Like, everything can be a buzzword. That whole term of like it being natural or it being clean, like, it doesn't mean too much because there's no regulation over it. So just always keep that in mind. Not everything is genetically modified. I don't want you guys going out and like never touching a Honey Crisp apple ever again. So it really just depends. But again, that could be a whole other topic of how it works, the cons and the benefits.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, thank you. Lots of great questions coming in. Let's talk about Stephen's question. So Stephen expressed something that I've heard often, that the FDA is corrupt. And Stephen, thank you so much for sharing that sentiment. I think I understand what you're saying. There's just, especially compared to other countries, America has a bad rap when it comes to the things that they allow in their foods.
I mean, Stephen, I'm completely validating how you feel. I think even as a dietitian, I get frustrated when you look at the regulations in Europe or Australia and how strict they are and how they're not allowed to have certain additives and ingredients in their food production. Like, why is the United States allowing this? Especially when we're sicker than ever, we're more overweight than ever. Like, it is very upsetting to see. I wish I had a better answer for you. I empathize with you. It is frustrating. The other thing I always tell patients is with the FDA, they also don't regulate our supplement industry. And I know that could be a whole other topic. And my thoughts are maybe that, they're just trying to oversee so many other things that some things get lost in the process. I don't really know, but I know it can be frustrating. So I always say be your own advocate. If you're going to do outside research, just make sure you're going to organizations, not like a .com. So go to a .org, .edu, .au. Those are going to be the ones that are more evidence-based. You're not going to go down this like conspiracy hole, essentially. But I know it's frustrating. It is really frustrating.
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that. I appreciate people showing up to events like this. I mean, it's what we talked about in the beginning. It's taking some control back. It's taking some power back. The FDA does a lot of great things in terms of, approving the drugs that are able to treat myeloma, right? And so it's that balance of, yes, I think we all wish right now, like, even though those cheddar and sour cream ruffles are so good, they have so many ingredients that should be in our body, right? And so it's just making those better decisions every time until we end up having foods that we're comfortable with going in our body.
And I do say, like, I know it sounds cliche, but you do kind of vote with your fork. Like, what you choose to purchase is going to also reflect on what consumers want. But again, be your own advocate. If you want to do your own research, just please go to reputable sites. Anyone can say they're a doctor. If they start pushing supplements on you, or just do a little digging to see if they're actually a doctor. Recently, a patient came to me with these supplements from a doctor who was actually a lawyer. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, being careful because, like you said, there's so many buzzwords out there. There's
Oh
so many
yeah.
people trying to money grab at you, and it's so
Yes.
frustrating. It's like we're dealing with myeloma. We don't want to
Exactly.
be dealing with the other stuff that's going on. Yeah, for sure.
Exactly.
Well, John is wondering, could you just review washing produce? Now,
Yep.
I think I want to make a distinction here before I have you answer. There's a difference between the level of washing you should do when you're post stem cell transplant
Yes.
versus when you're in a normal state of recovery with
Oh
not
yes.
dropped neutrophils.
Yeah.
So, if you wouldn't mind explaining normal
Yeah.
washing practices, and then maybe when you're severely immunocompromised after something like a stem
Mhm.
cell transplant, what you would want to do when it comes to
Oh
washing.
yeah, because they're night and day. So from my perspective and for the purpose of this presentation, it was more for just the general population post like more than 30 days post transplant. All you need is warm water, wash it for maybe 10 to 15 seconds, try to remove any visible dirt. Again, it's really nothing fancy. You don't need any of those scrubs or sprays. Warm water. The only thing I will say with berries, be very delicate with them because you can actually, if the water is too hot, you can cook the berries a little bit. I learned that in one of my food science classes back in undergrad. It was the coolest thing. But yeah, so it's just lukewarm water, maybe a little bit cooler water with the berries. And then just, you don't even need like a special scrub or anything, like a physical scrub. And then just wash it with a paper towel. Post transplant, if you were in that 30-day window, oh boy, you better be careful. Just because your immune system is so fragile during that time. So we don't want you doing anything that's pre-cut. Pre-washed is a little iffy too, just because you don't know the cleanliness of everything. And again, they do say try to avoid more raw produce, try to make sure everything's cooked. That way you're killing off any bacteria. You just have to be much more strict just so we keep you healthy in that 30 days.
Yeah, definitely. And we have a whole session that we've had on post stem cell diet. So if anybody's interested in that, let me know. I can get you a recording. Linda's wondering if you wash. So speaking of washing, let's say you like really get a good scrub on those dirty dozen. Does it make it
Yeah.
any better?
It does. It does remove some of the pesticide exposure. I don't want you to think like you telling me I can never have convention, like I can't go out to eat and get strawberries on whatever or a side of fruit. And you're telling me like I can't do that because it's not organic. Absolutely not. As long as they're washing it, yes, it is still removing some of the pesticide exposure. The thoughts behind the dirty dozen and the clean 15 is just to more educate people on ones that have the most exposure. But still, when you wash them, yes, you're going to remove some of that pesticide exposure versus if you didn't at all. So I always want you to wash your produce. Like I don't want you biting into an apple, like not washing it. Like, because also you don't know who's coughed on it, who's touched it. Like you just don't know.
Yes.
So that's my rule of thumb.
Awesome. I love it. Um, all right. One more question about washing
Oh yeah.
ingredients. Baking soda and water. Would you ever use baking soda when it comes to washing produce?
You can do it. I just don't think you need to. I think it's an extra step. If you think it tastes better and you like to do it that way, go for it. Again, I support you because you are eating fruits and vegetables, but I don't think it's necessary. No.
Yeah, I see a couple questions here of which ones to get organic. We're going to be including that in a
Mhm.
slide, but if you want to Google 2023 dirty
Dirty
dozen and
dozen.
clean 15.
15. Yep.
I love that. Okay, a good question here from Karen. How we're talking about the FDA. How well do they monitor that label of organic? Do they have to prove certain things to be
Yeah.
able to
So
certify as organic?
definitely. I mean, they do have, like, when you apply for that organic, USDA organic, yes, that is a very intense process. It's not something you just kind of like pay a fee for and then like check the box, we're done. No, there is a lot of regulation in that. I want you guys to take comfort in the fact that if it says it's 100% organic, if you see that USDA organic, yes, that is not going to have any of the banned or prohibited substances. That caveat, though, is that's the US. That does not apply to the banned substances in like Australia or Europe. I don't even think Canada. So again, it's for the US only. It's not going to be internationally. So if you're still concerned, you might want to look up some of the banned substances in other countries if that's a concern for you. But yes, it's rigorously tested. There's visits, there's a whole application fee. Yes.
Good. That's good
Yeah,
news.
I want you guys to take comfort. I don't want you guys to fear food. That is not my goal.
No, and I love what you said at the very end. I mean, it's about ingesting those vegetables and those fruits and
Yes,
having a
like,
plant forward diet. I appreciate that.
I'll never forget. It was like my first year in oncology, and like I was so excited. I've always wanted to work in oncology, guys. I love the cancer population, and I'll just never forget this one woman like wouldn't even eat like any produce because she's on a budget, but she would get like organic chips, organic cookies, organic bread. And I'm just like, you're missing the point. Like, I just want you to eat fruits and vegetables. Like, you have to look at your diet as a whole too. So always keep that in mind. I don't want you guys focusing on like the soy lecithin, which is like less than 1% of the ingredients. So always take that in mind. Look at your diet as a whole. More plants, the more color, the more texture, the better.
Yeah, awesome. Let's talk a little bit more about wild versus farmed fish.
Yes.
Is it clearly labeled? And I'm going to say I'm pretty sure it is, at least at Costco when I went a couple days ago. And also truly the color will stand out to you. I mean,
it's
the wild grown salmon was red. And when we cooked it, it was still that dark, beautiful color.
Yes.
So paying attention to the color, but does it specifically say in the label?
It has to. And it's what I like about the fish debate is it is very clear cut. It is either wild caught or it is farm raised. There's none of this like hybrid in between, like made with organic ingredients or just organic ingredients. Like it's less confusion. It's black, it's white, it's wild caught, it's farm raised, but the color is so much more beautiful. And less saturated fat. It's good for your heart, overall health. So yeah, that's a very easy differentiation.
Yeah, thank you. Bryce is wondering, how does garlic fit into this mix? Is there such thing as organic garlic?
I mean, I'm under the impression that anything like any fruit, vegetable, or I consider garlic a vegetable, can be organic, definitely. Garlic, though, you have to remember it comes in that really nice husk, and then you peel the husk, and then there's still another layer you have to peel. I would assume your exposure to pesticides is so small with the garlic because you also have to consider you're using maybe 1, 2. I mean, I'm Italian, so I tend to use 3 or 4 cloves, but much in the grand scheme of things. So I would say, that might not be worth it for organic. I know they sell like organic garlic powder, which is like astronomically expensive. Don't waste your money. That's my 2 cents.
Awesome. Okay, Nova has a great question here. How do frozen organic berries compare to fresh organic?
I was hoping someone would ask this. So there's a huge that frozen fruits and vegetables are less nutritious than fresh. And that's actually not the case. Frozen can be a lot more nutritious because what happens is they're flash frozen at the peak of harvest. And so when they're flash frozen, they retain all the vitamins and all the minerals. So let's say, the strawberries are grown in California. We have strawberry fields out here by City of Hope. It's really cool. But so let's say you're getting those strawberries, but you live in Maine, right? There is no way if you ship them from California to Maine, they're going to be as nutritious fresh just by the sheer travel distance across the country. But if they're frozen, yes, they retain those vitamins, the minerals, the vitamin C. So yes, frozen berries, especially in the dead of winter, are going to be more nutritious than the fresh ones. I always say if you're ever getting frozen produce, so whether that's vegetables or fruit, make sure it's just the fruit and the vegetables. It doesn't have extra like seasonings or sauce blends in there.
Right.
Otherwise, yes, it's and cheaper. So always remember that it is a little cheaper and it doesn't go bad.
Awesome. Thank you. Lots of excellent comments here. I know we're running low on time, but I'm going to try to fit into a couple more. So one of the questions here is leaf greens are super important to our diet. Is it best practice to do organic on all leafy greens? There were a couple of greens on that dirty dozen list, but should they just assume like all greens, it's better to do organic than not?
I would say from a pesticide exposure, yes, because you have to remember that the leafy greens, they are so delicate, they're so thin that they absorb a lot of those pesticides. So if you can afford it, yes, it's probably going to be in your best interest. But if you can't afford it, I don't want that to discourage you and you just never do leafy greens or salads again. But yes, generally all leafy greens, like romaine lettuce, the cabbage, the mustard greens, and spinach are going to be less exposed to pesticides if you get organic.
Awesome. Another question here, specifically about New Zealand honey, but understanding that sugar should be limited. Let's talk briefly about sugar. We're going to have a whole session on the relationship between sugar and cancer in June, so we don't need to take a lot of time. But let's talk about honey first of all,
Oh, yeah.
organic honey, and then bringing it on to how much sugar should they be limiting, and are
Yeah.
all sugars created equal?
This is a great question. I joke that I could retire by the beach right now if I had a penny every time someone told me sugar feeds cancer. At the end of the day, yes, sugar is sugar. It all breaks down technically to glucose. It's your body's preferred fuel source. However, sugar is a little different depending on where it's coming from. There's processed added sugar, and then there's naturally occurring sugar. And a lot of people with the honey, they get tripped up thinking it's one of those natural sugars, which technically, yes, it is, but I group it more in that processed added sugar because it's not like sugar from fruit that's giving you fiber, vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants. It's kind of just giving you that glucose. So in terms of limiting sugar, we say try to limit it as much as possible, but we try to cap it under 25 grams of added sugar. That's what they've been shown for overall health, specifically heart health. But I just want to say sugar does not feed cancer. It didn't cause your cancer, and it's not going to make your cancer more aggressive. So
Thank you. Thank you. Very important points. Thank you. Lara's asking a good question here. 40 years ago, organic food was ugly. It had holes from insect bites and was dried up. Today, organic food is beautiful. Is that because of pesticides?
Laura, that was a great comment. So yeah, that's a common misconception that organic produce doesn't have any pesticides. No, it does. It needs that. That's why you got those ugly apples with holes and rodents coming out of them. They're just the pesticides that are deemed allowable. They're considered generally recognized as safe. I know that's a term I use a few times, but it's what the FDA uses in terms of if it's going to harm human health. So it's called GRAS, GRAS, generally recognized as safe. So yes, that's another thing I guess I did not clarify, and I'm sorry about that, is that yes, still organic produce does have pesticides. It's just not the ones that are deemed harmful. So that's why organic produce, when you go to Whole Foods and you see those apples, baby, man, do they look perfect. And that's because of that. So that's a great point.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. Lots of great questions. I'm really sorry we won't get to them all. Let's finish on this one because I hear this one a lot. What's your general rule of thumb when it comes to alcohol? Do you want cancer? I mean, I
This
know
is a
there's not a
great
one size
question.
fits all,
Yeah.
but do you generally recommend that they significantly limit or eliminate alcohol from their lives?
I love this one too, because it's a hot topic in oncology. So you have the American Heart Association, right? And they came out with moderation. And moderation, depending on if you're a man or a woman, is 1 to 2 drinks a day, every day. And so that's 5 ounces of wine, 12 ounces of beer, 1 ounce of hard liquor. And you can do that every day. And according to the American Heart Association, moderation. The American Cancer Society says absolutely no alcohol under any circumstances for prevention, treatment, and survivorship. I personally think the American Heart Association is way too liberal with that. But I also think the American Cancer Society, while has the best of intentions, because yes, alcohol is a toxin, it can increase the risk of cancer. I don't think that's practical for a lot of people. So I say just save alcohol for a very special occasion, birthday, anniversaries, and just stick to 1 or 2 drinks. Don't go crazy. Try to limit any added sugar. If you can, no alcohol is best. I know a lot of our oncologists really preach that here, and I'm kind of with them, but I also understand that's not always feasible. So if you can, special occasion, but don't be drinking every single day.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Of
Thank you for
course.
being here.
Thanks
Great
for having me.
presentation. Is there any final words you want to say before we let you go for the night?
My goal as a dietitian working with cancer patients, I just want you guys to feel as best as possible going through a very stressful time. Just eat the fruits and the vegetables. That is all I ask. Again, I know you guys have a lot on your plates. So just really taking control, being your advocate, eating fruits and vegetables, and don't getting so tripped up on the little things. Make healthy choices where you can. And that's really it. I just want you guys to feel as best as possible.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This has been an excellent presentation, and
Thanks,
we really do
Audrey.
appreciate you, Kailey.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
With the audience, I'm just going to finish up with a couple of outro announcements. In June, we're going to be talking about sugar and cancer. What's the connection? I have a couple leads on who can speak to this topic, but I'm wanting to make sure we get the right person to come speak to us. So I will let you know when that's available to register for, who's going to be speaking and when's it going to be, but just save the date in your mind. June 2023, we'll meet again, and we're going to be talking about what is the connection between sugar and cancer, because there are so many misconceptions out there. You can also connect with us. We have a group that we can connect in between these bi-monthly meetings. It's called the Nutrition and Wellness for Myeloma HealthTree Connect group, and we'll send out that link as part of our email. With all of the resources and all of the slides that were shared today. Another upcoming event that you might be interested in tomorrow is our Northeast Myeloma event. So if you live anywhere from Maine to Delaware, make sure to join us. Maine to Pennsylvania, I guess. Make sure to join us. And then the 18th is a caregiver chapter. We're going to be discussing the role of a caregiver during the stem cell transplant. The 19th is our Mountain West regional chapter. We're going to be talking about minimal residual disease. The link to sign up for any of those events and even more events I didn't mention is found at the bottom of this slide and will be included in our follow-up email. Another thank you to our sponsors, Adaptive Amgen, Janssen, AbbVie, and Genentech. And thank you to each of you for your great questions, for helping this discussion, for helping us build this community. I appreciate each one of you. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.